Hello, listeners. It's our wild backyard. I'm your host, Jennifer McLaughlin, and today's episode will buzz around and explore bumblebees with Amanda Bachmann. Amanda is the urban entomology field specialist with South Dakota State University Extension. As an urban entomologist, she works not only with the, quote, traditional urban pests like bed bugs and mosquitoes, but also urban pollinators and other beneficial insects, as well as helping specialty crop producers with insect issues. So let's start at the basics. If someone doesn't know what a bumblebee is, what is it? And maybe how is it different than like a bee or a wasp?
Yeah, so they're actually not that different from bees and wasps. So bumblebees are in the order Hymenoptera. So that order includes our bees, our wasps, our ants. These are all insects with complete metamorphosis. So they go through the egg. The larval stage looks very different from the adult insect. So we don't really see the larva. And then they go through a pupal stage. A lot of people are more familiar with, butterflies pupating. You've got that beautiful chrysalis that, say, a monarch butterfly makes. Hymenopterans do the same thing. It's, again, a little bit more cryptic. You're probably not going to see it unless you're a honeybee keeper. And then we have the adult insect. So, like all insects, it's got our three main body parts: head, thorax, abdomen. It has two pairs of membranous wings. So, unlike our butterflies, where the wings are covered with like colorful patterns and scales, our wasps have those clear, kind of like filmy little wings. And bumblebees are sort of our larger, like heavier bodied of our bees and wasps. They are chunky, they're fuzzy. Honeybees, aren't super small, but they are a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner, a little bit lighter. Bumblebees are, about sort of like three times the weight of a honeybee.
Are they a subset of bees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So bumblebees are a kind of bee. So you've got order Hymenoptera. The family is Apidae, and so that is the same family that our honeybees are under as well. So then they branch off into different genera. So they are actually pretty closely related. Um, yeah, and they're both, Bombus and the Apis. So Bombus is the genus for our social bumblebees. Apis is our genus for honeybees. Those are under the same family, so they are cousins. They're very closely related.
So it's like in the whole kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Is that the genus that differentiation comes between bees and bumblebees?
Yeah. So like the genus and species thing I remember from like school, it was like, okay, it's kind of like first name, last name. Like the genus is like your last name, and the species is like your first name. You put them together, you've got a unique organism. And so in this case, it's like their great great grandparents were the same. These are like, second cousins once removed kind of situation. You've got two different last names.
Okay, okay, I like that comparison. So, imagine you're a bumblebee and you're in someone's backyard and you're just waking up for the day. What would your day look like from morning to night?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on what your role is in the bumblebee colony. Like if it is spring and you are the queen, your job is everything because you are the only member of your family so far. So you are going out, you are foraging for pollen and nectar, you are coming back to your little nest and starting to lay eggs and provision, for your upcoming brood. And as those eggs hatch and those larvae develop, you end up with daughters who can help with some of the tasks. So as you produce more daughters, those daughters are going to be going out and being able to forage and bring back pollen and help with the brood rearing. And then you as the queen can kind of like hang out and just focus on laying eggs and taking care of things in the hive. Um, but yeah, a lot of your time as a bumblebee is going to be spent looking for, pollen and nectar, energy for you, and then also energy for your sisters in the hive. And so that's why we want people to plant more flowers, especially native flowers.
And so that annual cycle then, it sounds like the daughters are only around for a year,
Mhm.
and then it's just the queen that overwinters
Yep.
and then creates a new family in the
Yep.
spring.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's, so the thing, a lot of people are like, "Oh, honeybees, like that queen can persist for multiple years because you are managing that hive and, like, keeping them, like, safe and warm and fed and all that fun stuff." But yeah, with bumblebees, like, they are out there having to survive on their own. They're also nesting, in the ground or in sort of brush or, like, otherwise sort of low concealed locations. Um, a lot of times, abandoned rodent burrows will be taken over by bumblebees and used as, a nesting location, so then they don't have to do as much, like, excavation. Um, Bumblebee nests are really interesting. They almost look like piles of, like, beeswax bubbles because they do make wax, they do make nectar, bumblebees do make honey. It's just that it's not in any sort of orderly fashion that we can exploit.
Oh,
Like
okay.
like, you can't put bumblebees in a square frame and have them build something orderly and be happy. Honeybees, you can get a frame of, capped wax, you can slice off that wax and extract the honey from it. Bumblebees, there's no easy way to harvest their honey, and so that's why we have not used them for that kind of a product. 'Cause
Okay.
it's not efficient, it's not produced in such a quantity, like, we've got honeybees for that.
Can you find bumblebee honey anywhere to eat, or is it really that hard to
It's
harvest?
really that hard. Like, definitely I highly recommend looking up the pictures of, like, the excavated nests because it's just like a blob. Like, it's a blob of bubbles and, like,
Just underground.
yep, underground.
How big are these? When you say they use rodent tunnels, they look more like a mouse or like a vole?
So, yeah, I mean, more commonly because we do have more, like, mice and voles, I've had them use an abandoned rabbit, like,
Oh,
little
that's
little
still pretty
rabbit
big.
den. Yeah, and the Xerces Society, like, listening to some of their webinars recently, some of their researchers have been part of, like, nest excavation projects, and, like, the one gal was like, "Yeah, I could lay down in the hole that we excavated the nest from." So they can
Whoa.
be very large. But yeah, no, the rabbits, the rabbits used this little, like, sort of depression, like, hole in my yard. Once the rabbits were gone, like, there was still, like, a little bit of, like, a dead spot, like, of, thatched grass over there that never, like, the grass, like, nothing ever re-encroached, and so I was like, "Huh, that's weird." And I went to investigate it, and as I got closer, I could kind of hear buzzing, and I'm like, "What is happening here?" And then being, the scientist that I am, I, like, started, like, peeling back layers and, like, I grabbed a stick to kinda, like, poke it. And a bumblebee flew out. I was like, "Huh, there's bumblebees nesting here." So I continued to, like, mow around it and not, mow over it. But yeah, I had bumblebees just, like, nesting in the middle of my yard, and it can be super tricky to find their nest because they are, like, very cryptic. I've had friends that have had, kind of like incline areas of their backyard that maybe they have like some twigs, some leaves, kind of like a little bit of a mini compost pile happening, and they've had bumblebees like nesting in that. So the undisturbed areas of your yard are nesting habitat, and that's one of the things that bumblebees, but also a lot of our other native bee species need. They're going to be ground nesters, maybe stem nesters, but they need those areas that aren't being dug up or tilled or like raked clean in order to have habitat.
Well, let's talk about flowers or what bees eat. What's considered a delicacy for them? What are they looking for in their food sources?
So it is going to depend on the species. Some of them are very specific and will only go for certain kinds of flowers because of like the length of their tongue or just when they're active during the year. Bumblebees do tend to enjoy flowers that have a more like tubular structure because they'll actually kind of like they're big enough that they can kind of like get into the flower and get that nectar resource that might be at the very bottom. There are some bumblebees that will take the lazy route and they're like, I know the nectar's at the bottom, and they will chew through the side of the flower.
So they're cheaters.
Yeah, sometimes they'll rob the nectar without, getting brushed by the pollen. And then as they're getting that pollen on their bodies, they're actually grooming it into those packs on the sides of their legs that you'll notice in pictures of bumblebees. Like they groom the pollen into these packs on the sides of their legs, the pollen baskets that they then carry back to the hive, and that's a food source. So pollen is protein rich, so that's how they're getting protein in their diet. The nectar is sugar, and that's sort of an immediate energy source, like a soda for us. But yeah, the pollen is their protein source. We encourage the use of native perennials because those are going to, once they establish, they can be easier to care for. But also, those are the plants that these bumblebee species have evolved with. So these are the plants that they recognize as having enough pollen and nectar to be worth their time. Sometimes, I plant annuals in containers. I'm not, hating on annuals, and some of them are good pollen and nectar sources, but some of those are bred for looking cool to people. And when you look cool to people, you're not necessarily producing the same level of floral resources to be a good nutrition source for bees. That's another thing, like with flowers, we want to have, groups or drifts of, nice little clumps of the same species, because then it makes it a lot easier for the bumblebees to forage. Like if it's something they like, they can just kind of like hit the whole patch, get what they need, and go back to the nest. Like it's like when your shopping list is in all one aisle and you're like, yes, jackpot. So like planting a group or a drift of the same kind of plant is like that for a bumblebee.
So one of my favorite things about bumblebees is seeing them absolutely covered in pollen and like so thick on their legs it looks like they're wearing leg warmers. How much pollen do they collect? And you said they have like these little pockets like in their legs that they can
Yeah,
shove more pollen into?
they're not so much pockets as like little like kind of like hairs on the legs that they can then use to like pack pollen onto.
Okay.
So you think about like pollen grains are very, very small. So like we're also going to be like working with like static forces, like some of our like van der Waals, like molecular forces that you haven't heard about since middle school. Um, but yeah, they
Let's not
can.
go back to middle school.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's like it's a trying time for all of us. But yeah, so like a bumblebee is about a gram total in body weight, like plus or minus depending on, if it's queen or if it's a worker, but like about a gram. That's like a couple of paper clips. They can carry, two or three times their body weight in pollen. So
Whoa.
it's a lot of pollen. They can really they can really carry quite a bit.
And how much area do they cover then in a day?
So they can go about 6,000 meters, which is about like 2,000 feet. Like, with their size, if they're looking for a nesting site or really having to forage farther, like they can go like 2 or 3 miles if they have to,
Okay.
but they don't want to because like the farther you go, the riskier that is and all sorts of things. But they'll, about on average will be within about, 6,000 meters of their nest. So, like, a quarter of a mile.
Oh, quite the adventurous travelers they are. I think when a lot of people think about bumblebees, they think of bees in general. We've already talked that bumblebees do make honey. Do bumblebees sting?
Yes, they can sting.
Okay.
I was actually stung by one, this past summer, during a master gardener training course because I was harassing it. So
Well,
this
Amanda.
Yes, we were catching insects. Took the nets, had them catch insects, and then I was the one who was putting the insects from the net into the bug dorm so that everybody could see them, and kind of lost track of where the bee was in the net, and she like got me on like the side of my finger. It was like through the net, so it wasn't like a full sting, but like it smarted. So so bumblebees are absolutely capable of stinging. When you encounter the female wasp or the female bee, the female of the species, they have an ovipositor, and that is the organ that is modified to be a stinger, to be a defensive weapon. The males are going to be useless. They're there for mating. They cannot sting you. Females hardly want to either. Um, but if you think about like when these insects will sting, it is when they are being threatened or their hive is being threatened. So think about honeybees. If you're walking up to the nest, to the bee box and like giving it a good shake, they're gonna be mad. They're gonna sting you because they think you're a bear that's trying to like rob their honey. They're gonna use that defensive mechanism. Same deal with bumblebees, but yeah, absolutely capable of stinging, but are not going to unless you are really up in their business.
So if you're just walking past a plant,
They'll be
it's
fine.
gonna ignore you.
Gonna
But if
ignore
you
you.
go up into them and you're like trying to poke it, chase it, it might try to defend itself and sting you.
Yeah, usually though, they're really gonna fly off. Like that light change, they see your shadow, they're like, "Peace out. You're you're a bird, you're gonna eat me, like, I don't want any of that heat." Like, but even foraging, they're not going to attack you. Um, there are so many flowers that it's, like, not worth it for them to be defending one lone flower.
I feel like people find them annoying. Why should people care about them and maybe see them as not so annoying?
Yeah, that is man, I get some wild calls sometimes. Uh, there was one from a daycare quite a few years ago that they were like, how do I get rid of the bumblebees in the backyard? I don't want the kids getting stung." And I'm like, "1, I'm team B here. Kids can learn important lessons." Uh, um, but 2, if you don't want bumblebees, you need to not have flowers. Like, that is what's attracting them. So if you are truly having a yard or a space where you need there to be no insects, plant turf. Like, nothing flowering. Like, if you really want a 0 insect experience, you won't be successful. There will still be some bugs, but if you really want to eliminate the majority of insect life from your yard, have turf with nothing flowering. Also, no trees. So, like,
That sounds really sad.
yeah,
Yeah.
right?
I feel like you're gonna be missing out on something. Like the bumblebees, I'm assuming provide some benefits to the natural ecosystem.
Yes. Yeah, insects, bumblebees, all of our class insecta friends are a really important part of the ecosystem. They are food for birds is a really big one. So if you
Mm.
are somebody who's, got into birding post-pandemic or during the pandemic and you want more birds in your life, you absolutely need to have insects. There are some like wild statistics out there of just how many insects baby birds need to complete development. Um, like they need so many bugs. Which is why we need to have habitat for insects. Also, our flowers, our garden vegetables, they need our pollinators. So they need bumblebees, they need our honeybees, they need our other species of native bees in order to move pollen from flower to flower so that you get your squash and your tomatoes and your beans and all sorts of, those fun things that you like to eat. So yeah, we absolutely need insects. And as people start to appreciate, like the bees and the butterflies, and then seeing how habitat for those insects is actually supporting habitat for all of the rest of it. Like once you're supporting, the bees, like you're 90% of the way there. Like you're good.
That's
You've
awesome.
you've done enough. Like,
It's
but
a
it's
good
also
place
going,
to start if you want to help
yeah,
the
exactly.
natural world, is to help
Yep.
bees and
Yeah.
bumblebees. That's awesome. Is there anything that we're doing as humans that are causing problems for bumblebees? And are they seeing the same kind of collapse as we've heard talked about with honeybees?
Yeah, so with bumblebees, it's been harder to track their population because we don't manage them like livestock. So with honeybees, we can do, very good counts of colony numbers of honey production. They are a massive agricultural industry. So it's just like, counting a bunch of tiny cows. Bumblebees and the other native bee species are a lot harder because the nests are more cryptic. There's so many more species, and you know, we're not keeping them in places that's easy for us to find them. It's harder to count bumblebees. There is a community science project. It's almost nationwide. Like there's most areas of the country have a bumblebee atlas project, and the Xerces Society is one of the leading partners in that project, and they have a whole protocol with lots of great identification resources for folks to, adopt a grid cell in their state, go out twice a year in the summer and sample for bumblebees, because we're trying to figure out like, okay, what bumblebees are where and approximately how many might there be. Um, so we are trying to learn more about what we have. In the Midwest, the rusty patch bumblebee is in sort of the more Wisconsin, Minnesota area, but that's one that's been in the news because it was listed as being endangered. So it was one of the first bumblebees to be listed as being endangered.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, the things that humans are doing, like we have messed up their habitat. We have, we've reduced the amount of, land that's just out there hanging out. So the habitat that we can create in towns is really helpful. If we can change the way that we're managing, areas that aren't great for farming. So if you're somebody who's like, I have this land, it's not making me money farming, like what can I do with it? There are a lot of conservation programs between government, non-government agencies, nonprofits that exist to create habitat, because honestly, creating pheasant habitat creates bumblebee habitat. Like it's very similar. Another thing that people can do is to really be cognizant of their pesticide use. A pesticide is the umbrella term for your herbicides, your insecticides, your fungicides. In your backyard, you're most likely using herbicides and maybe some insecticides. Uh, Try to move away from using either of those, especially the insecticides, because a lot of the ones that are available for home use are very broad spectrum, meaning that they will kill anything they contact. There are insecticides that are very selective. A lot of our BT or Bacillus thuringiensis products, those are derived from a soil bacterium and can be very specific to either fly larvae or caterpillars. Or if you have a water feature or a pond or a rain barrel, you can throw some BT in there so that you don't have mosquito larvae. So there are important uses for insecticides. We just want people to make sure that they're using them judiciously, trying to use ones that are as specific as possible to avoid the off-target effects to our things like bumblebees. And then obviously, with herbicides, like the more flowering plants you're removing, the more, the more pollen and nectar you're sort of taking out. So, those absolutely have a place, as tools, but we just want to make sure that we're using them in a way that is minimizing their impact to bumblebees and other insects,
It's all in moderation.
all in moderation.
So if someone wants to step outside their house, their apartment and spot a bumblebee, where should they look?
So, look at flowers. Anything that's blooming, make sure your shadow's behind you and just sit there and see what shows up. Obviously, if it's a sunny day, if it's a little bit warmer, those are going to be better conditions for bee foraging. They're not going to be out on a cloudy, rainy day. They don't enjoy that nearly as much. But yeah, so flowers, make sure your shadow's behind you. Sunny, a little bit warmer.
Awesome. You're like looking at those anyway. So we're gonna win two things: pretty flowers, cool bumblebees. Be a good day. This has been fabulous, Amanda. Thank you so much for sharing your bumblebee knowledge and passion with us. I am eager to see one now, and see all this pollen and kind of understand where it's all traveling, how it's living. It's a great way to appreciate that nature out there, out our window. So can't wait to get out in it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you have questions about flora or fauna species you see in your backyard, please email them to info@ourwildbackyard.org, and it may just be answered on an upcoming episode. Until next time, take care and enjoy nature in your neighborhood.